All right, so today we're going to cover the structures and the anatomy of the digestive system. We'll start off with the salivary glands. So if we look here, we've got the parotid gland, which has the parotid duct. That's this right here. If we go below the tongue, we have the sublingual gland. And you can see the mandible here. If you go below the mandible, you have the submandibular gland. That takes care of our glands. Now we're going to move over to this model. And so we're going to start here. So normally with the pharynx here that we covered in the respiratory system, we would go into the larynx, into the trachea. Posterior to that is the esophagus. We're going to follow the esophagus all the way down, okay? And the connection between the esophagus and the stomach, there's a sphincter, a circular muscle called the cardiac sphincter. Now it has three names. It's called cardiac sphincter. It's also called lower esophageal sphincter, and it's also called gastroesophageal sphincter, and any of those are correct. Most common clinically is cardiac sphincter, but any of them are the same thing. Now, we have regions of the stomach too, and so this is where it gets a little confusing because regions don't have exact lines to define them, so I'm going to kind of trace the approximate regions. So underneath the cardiac sphincter, this area adjacent to it, it's a very small area, right about there, that is called the cardiac region of the stomach. If we were to draw, let's say, a line across here, this dome, that area of the stomach, that's called the fundic region of the stomach. Now we take those 2 points out, and so we go here, right about there, trace it one more time, that's the body of the stomach, and then right here is the pyloric region of the stomach, okay, so in there. Now, these little folds inside here, these are structures. Now, if I do it on a test and I say name the region, then you're going to name a region, but you're not going to give me a region unless the question specifically says name a region. Now, if we go here at any of the structures in the stomach, these little folds, they're called stomach rugae or rugae of the stomach, okay? At the end of the pyloric region, we have the pyloric sphincter. Okay, this is again a circle of muscle. Now we're cutting it in half on the model. That's why it looks like this. It looks like there's two. They're not. It's just a circular muscle called the pyloric sphincter going into the first section of the small intestine called the duodenum. So let me pull this off and we can look at some of the other sections here. So the beginning section is the duodenum. When we're inside, there are circular folds in here and they are called plicae circularis. So if I'm inside the intestine, I'm looking for plicae circularis. If I'm on the outside, let's say here, then I want the section, which is duodenum. Now it becomes the jejunum, which is not going to be testable because it's very difficult to determine where it begins and ends. Not as much as where it begins, but more where it ends, and we're not going to test on it. So we're going to skip to the very end of the small intestines. I'm going to go here, at least as much as we can see, because that folds underneath. We've got this section that plugs into the large intestine, and that last section of the intestine is called the ileum. So the duodenum up here is testable, and then the ileum down here is testable, okay? And then the ileum will plug into this section right about here of the large intestine. It's called the cecum. This right here is the actual valve that regulates entry from the ileum into the cecum. This is called the ileocecal valve. Okay, so if I'm anywhere in here, we're looking ileocecal valve here or here, ileocecal valve. If I'm inside here, we're in the cecum. If I'm here, it's going to be ileum. Okay. All right. Now we have the appendix coming off of the cecum. Okay, there's the appendix, and let me put the large intestine back on there. And so let's go up the large intestine and around. And so we'll go up as we go past the cecum. This is the ascending colon. And then it bends. And the bend on the right side is called the right colic flexure, or because the liver's here, it's called the hepatic flexure. Then we have the transverse colon. On the left side, we have the left colic flexure, where it bends, or the splenic flexure. And then we go down the descending colon, and as it starts to curve, somewhere right about there, it goes like this, and that is going to be the sigmoid colon that plugs into the rectum here. Okay. Now, if we go down towards the bottom of the rectum, you've got some sphincters. Again, this is cut, so we're looking at kind of a half circle here. So it's not two sides, it's one circle that we cut in half, or it's technically two circles because there's two muscles. So you have an internal anal sphincter, that's these, and then separated by this here, Outside of that line, we have the external anal sphincter. Okay, make sure we clarify anal sphincter for these. This is external anal sphincter, this is internal anal sphincter. Okay. Now, there are some structures on the large intestine that we have to be specific. So if I ask for, name the structure, you give me the section, transverse colon is the section. However, there are structures on the structures. The specific pouches are called haustrum. Haustra would be plural, and so that's what, if I say name the structure, be specific, you would say haustra or haustrum. If I'm on this band, this tendon-like band here, and I say name the structure, be specific, it would be Teniae coli. And if I'm on any of these little yellow tags and say name the structure, be specific, it would be epiploic appendages. Okay? So we have to pay attention to the wording if I'm asking for specific or if I'm asking just for the general section, okay? Which would just be the structure, not a structure, be specific. All right. Now we've got to do the liver as well. Oh, actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and go over to this model. When we're inside, the circular folds that I talked about, those plicae circularis, they have little finger-like structures on them called villi. This is a blown-up model of the villi. Each of these is a villus, and plural is villi. And inside a villus, there is a lymphatic capillary called a lacteal, okay, represented by this green thing here. Okay. Now, from the pictures, you can see it from the textbook. You can't see it on the model here, but there's little hair-like structures on the outside of the villus called microvilli. And that's best visualized from a picture. Now, let's go ahead and do the liver.